A very good evening to all our viewers and welcome to Primetime News coming to you live from our Newsfirst studios in Colombo. I'm Arundhati Mudanayaka together with our interpreter this evening, Brian De Cruz, who's joining us via Zoom. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines this evening.
No plan to suppress media, says Media Minister. JVP reveals of massive corruption when importing sugar and coconut oil. Cabinet approves the importation of coconut. United Nations to support Sri Lanka to procure, distribute and administer the COVID-19 vaccine. UK flights not permitted to enter Sri Lanka. Tenure of the Presidential Commission appointed to investigate the April 21st attack extended till the 31st of January 2021.
Main sponsor.
The story is in detail now. The second phase of the Viru Abhiman insurance scheme to provide financial cover for state officials began today. An insurance certificate was handed over to the President by the Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation Chairman Jagat Walawatha to mark its commencement.
Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation had launched the first phase of the Viru Abhiman insurance scheme amidst the initial outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in the country. The scheme aims at providing financial cover for healthcare employees, health ministry officials, Triforces, police and other state officials. Under the insurance scheme, 100,000 rupees would be paid as compensation for the loss of life due to COVID-19 and 1,000 rupees in the case of hospitalization. Further, an allowance of 2,000 rupees will be paid for intensive care treatment running across a maximum of 90 days.
The Janata Vimukti Peramuna claims that the tax concessions granted through the recent gazettes have paved the way for fraudulent activities to take place in the imports of sugar and coconut oil.
The Janata Vimukti Peramana has said that the government had published a gazette on the 14th of December repealing previous directives on the 16th of June, 20th of June and the 10th of July to provide tax concessions for two importers who had imported 10,000 metric tons of coconut oil.
A gazette was published on the 26th of June instructing the imposition of a 150 rupee tax on a kilogram of coconut oil. Thereafter, on the 10th of July, another gazette was published instructing the removal of 25 rupees from the 150 rupee tax imposed previously. The gazette issued on the 15th of December then instructed the imposition of a 125 rupee tax on a kilo of coconut oil. This was only applicable for 12 hours on the 14th of December. On the 14th of December, a ship carrying 7,000 metric tons of coconut oil imported by Wilma arrived at the Colombo port. The total stock of coconut oil was imported by 3 entities. However, 2 of them were small-scale businesses. A majority, that is 7,000 metric tons, were imported by Wilma. It is amusing how the Sri Lanka Customs had only charged 100 rupee tax from Wilma for every kilo of coconut oil that was imported. The tax charged is 25 rupees less than what was instructed by the Gazette notification. In other words, they have allowed Wilma to make an additional profit of 175 million rupees. If you access their official website, you would clearly see that the Adani Group of companies and Wilma International are a part of a joint venture. Wilma is backing the move to give away the East Container Terminal to the Adani Group. We hope to file a complaint at the Criminal Investigations Department in this regard.
The Cabinet has approved the importation of coconuts for a period of 3 months. 13,000 metric tons of dried coconut pieces will be imported in batches for a period of 3 months through BCC Lanka Limited that comes under the purview of the Ministry of Industries. We have taken this measure to support our local industries, exporters, producers of coconut oil and to ensure that the public will be able to purchase coconut oil at a reasonable price.
Farmers have been affected due to the infestation of the Sena caterpillar across several acres of maize fields in the country. The latest infestation of the Sena caterpillar has been reported from the Kolambana area in the Ampara district. Farmers lament that their hopes have turned into despair due to the massive damages caused to maize crops by these caterpillars.
නිලධාරියෙක්වත් රජේ ඇවිල්ලා බලන්නේ නැහැ කිව්වටවත්. බැංකුව වලට ණය වෙලා මේ අරගෙන වැඩ කරලා තියෙන්නේ. ඉතින් කිසිම නැහැ මේක.
Distressed at the hands of this growing menace, farmers had complained to the agrarian officers in Padyatalava with the hope of receiving a solution. However, their pleas have fallen to deaf ears. Some farmers say they cannot pawn off any more belongings to purchase pesticides.
මුදලාල්ලාගේ නාට ගන්නෙ, ඉරුඟට ගන්නවා, ඊහානවා, බෙහෙත් ගන්නවා.
Farmers of the Aluddiulweva area in Galenbindunweva are also facing a similar plight. They say that corn is cultivated only during the Maha harvesting season. However, Sena caterpillars have invaded their fields less than 1.5 months into the season. Farmers lament that state officials have failed to address this problem despite its existence for nearly 3 years. At the cabinet media briefing today, journalists queried the Minister of Mass Media, Keheli Rambukwala, about an earlier statement he made regarding social media.
Honourable Minister, you became a headline yesterday. You had made a statement about regulating social media users in Kandy, but you retracted that claim. You may have made a mistake, but did you insulate that there is a plan in place by the government to suppress selected media channels and websites that speak against the government? I would have never made a mistake if there was such a plan like that. My statement was made when we were coming out following a discussion. I have presented a comprehensive statement about that. I think that is sufficient. Therefore, I would like to tell you again that if there was such a plan, I would have not made a mistake. However, we have no plan as such at present. Issuing a statement in this regard, the Information Technology Society of Sri Lanka said that the users who enter social media and are operating an account on social media do not have to register under the government. The statement added, if the government is planning on doing that, it will be an oppression towards freedom of speech. If the government is purely thinking on part of the people, the first thing they should control is the price of goods. They have to control the spread of COVID-19 virus. But instead, the government is trying to control Facebook. I saw that Kehri Rambukwala had said that they are going to take steps to register social media users. That only depicts one thing. They have managed to get hold of state media and other private media. The citizens of Sri Lanka turned out to be a political affair for the government.
While a certain individual is claiming that the disease can be cured through a tonic, another person is claiming that throwing pots of water would do the job. Vaccines are being distributed across the world, but the country's chief epidemiologist has said that we have not made such arrangements. How much funds will the country receive? How much would be required to purchase the vaccine? Will the entire population of 22 million receive the jab? Let's assume that 10 million people will receive the vaccine. If that is the case, what is the procedure to distribute the doses? Do we have enough manpower to undertake the responsibility? Will we have to train additional staff temporarily? None of these matters has been addressed as of yet.
Which COVID-19 vaccine will be suitable for Sri Lanka and what steps are in place to procure and distribute them? Views in this regard were expressed in several platforms.
While a certain individual is claiming that the disease can be cured through a tonic, another person is claiming that throwing pots of water would do the job. Vaccines are being distributed across the world, but the country's chief epidemiologist has said that we have not made such arrangements. How much funds will the country receive? How much would be required to purchase the vaccine? Will the entire population of 22 million receive the jab? Let's assume that 10 million people will receive the vaccine. If that is the case, what is the procedure to distribute the doses? Do we have enough manpower to undertake the responsibility? Will we have to train additional staff temporarily? None of these matters has been addressed as of yet.
අපි හොයලා බලනකොට ඒ පිළිබඳ කිසිදු අවධානයක් හෝ සූදානමක් නැහැ.
If a country like Sri Lanka has failed to completely bring the virus under control, we have failed. That would mean that we have to set our eyes on a vaccine. But the government is promoting unscientific approaches such as a tonic and throwing pots of water. There is a doubt on whether they have at least engaged in diplomatic talks to obtain the vaccine. Diplomatic discussions are required to bring down the vaccine from countries such as the UK, US and Germany. But nothing has been done so far. Therefore, we request the government to intervene diplomatically and bring down the vaccine while adopting scientific approaches to eliminate COVID-19 from the country. Views were expressed on obtaining a vaccine against COVID-19 during the Women's Satana program on Sirasa TV.
දැන් අපි ලිස්ට් එකට ගියත් ලබන අවුරුද්දෙත් අන්තිමේ තමයි අපේ මිනිස්සුන්ට එන්නත් කරණය කරගන්න සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ. මාලදිවිනත් පටන් අරගෙන
අපේ අයත් පටන් ගන්නවා.
ඔයගොල්ලෝ පටන් ගන්න
ඔයගොල්ලෝ කලබල නොවී ඉන්න. මොකද ඒක රජයේ තීරණයක්.
විෂ්ට තෙල් කල්ක පැණි ඒව කාගේද? ඔබතුමීගේ දේශීය ආයුර්වේද අමාත්‍යවරයා තමයි
හරි දේශීය ආයුර්වේදය කියන එක තමයි අපි
දේශීය ආයුර්වේදය සහ මිත්‍යාව කියන දෙකක්
අපේ ජනාධිපතිතුමාවත් කවුරුත් මිත්‍යාවක් අපි පිළි අරගෙන ගියේ නෑ.
එහෙනම් ඇයි විද්‍යාව
අපි ආණ්ඩුවෙන් පරීක්ෂණය කළා තමයි අපි පැණි වර්ග හදලා තියෙන ආයුර්වේද.
ධම්මික පැණිය හැදුවා. එතකොට ආණ්ඩුවෙන් පරීක්ෂණය කළා.
පැණියට අපේ රජයේ සහභාගීත්වයක් නෑ.
හරි. එහෙනම් විද්‍යාව අනුව අපි ගිහිල්ලා ඉන්දියාව මාලදිවයින වගේ රටවලුත් එන්නත් කරන්නට යනවා නම් කො අපි සැලසුම් අපිට ඉක්මනට එන්න
අපිට කියනවා ඇයි අපි ඒ තරම්
කවදද යන්නේ?
මං අහන්නේ ඇයි අපිට ස්වයං පාලනයක් ස්වයං විනයක් තියලා ඇයි අපිට බැරි කොහෙවත් තියෙන ඉන්ජෙක්ෂන් එකක් ගහ ගන්නවා නම් ඇයි අපිට බැරි අපි
දැන් ඔබතුමිය කියන්නේ මේ ඉන්ජෙක්ෂන් එක අපිට එපා කියලාද?
ඉදිරි කාලය තුලදී ඔය ගේන ඉන්ජෙක්ෂන් එකක් ගැන සහතික තියාගෙන ඉන්නවට වඩා හොඳයි අපිම මේ ඉන්න මිලියන 22ක ජනතාව ඇයි අපිට පාලනය වෙලා පළවෙනි සැරේ පළවෙනි කොවිඩ් රැල්ල අපිට පාලනය කරලා
ඔබතුමියගේ සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යවරයෙක් කිව්වා මේක ජනතාවට එහෙම මහ ලොකුවට පරිස්සම් වෙන්න දෙයක් නෙවෙයි කියලා යමක් සමාජ ජනතාවට
ඔබතුමිය නොකියා කියන්නේ මේ ඉන්ජෙක්ෂන් එක අපිට හම්බ වෙන්නේ නැහැ කියන එක.
අපිට හම්බ වෙනවා. ඇයි අපි ඕකට හදිස්සි වෙන්නේ? මොකටද ඉන්ජෙක්ෂන් එක ගහන්නේ?
මේ ඇයි අපි හදිස්සි වෙන්නේ කියන එක අහුවාම ඇඟ ටිකක් සලිත වෙලා ගියා.
අනිවාර්යෙන් විරුද්ධයි.
දැන් රටවල් වලට දෙන ප්‍රමාණයක් තියෙනවා. රටවල් වලින් ඉල්ලන ලයිස්තුවක් තියෙනවා.
අපි කවදද ඉල්ලුවේ කොහොමද ඉල්ලුවේ?
ඒක අවශ්‍ය පිළිවෙලට ගරු ජනාධිපති ඕගොල්ලෝ තීරණය කරාට අපේ රට මේක ගහන්න ඕනේ කියලා. නමුත් තාමත් ඒක විදගත් රටවල්.
හරි. මොකක්ද තියෙන සොලියුෂන් එක? මේ ආණ්ඩුවේ තියෙන සොලියුෂන් එක මොකක්ද? කිසිම සොලියුෂන් එකක්
නෑ. අපිට කියන්නේ එකම දෙයයි. ඔය කියන බෙහෙත් එක විශ්වාස කරලා ඕගොල්ලෝ අයාලේ නිදැල්ල යන්න එපා.
මේක ඔබතුමීගේ පක්ෂේ මතයේද? ආණ්ඩුවේ මතයේද? මට දැනගන්න ඕනේ මේක.
Questions were raised during today's cabinet media briefing on the tonic developed by an indigenous medical practitioner by the name of Dhammika in Kegol.
පැණිය පානය කිරීමත් සමග යම්කිසි සම්පූර්ණතාවයක් ඇති වුවහොත් මෙහි වගකීම් බාරගන්නේ රජයේද කාලිමෑනියෝද ධනපාල බාසුන්වද?
මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඇත්තටම විධිමත් පරීක්ෂණයක් සිදු කරන්නට සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශයේ
The State Minister of Health, Channa Jayasumana, and the relevant health units are taking steps to conduct a thorough investigation into this. The Formula Committee of the Ayurveda Department has approved the tonic. Once it is approved by the Formula Committee, the Ethics Review Committee must also grant its approval. Once it is received, we hope to carry out scientific validation into the product. Tests must be carried out to determine whether the tonic can cure the disease completely. That is what we are planning to do. But we cannot prevent anyone from consuming it at their discretion. That is because the product has been approved as an indigenous medicine. Therefore, we cannot oppose that.
ඒකට අපිට විරුද්ධ වෙන්න හැකියාවක් නැහැ.
Meanwhile, the National Research Council has said that it is conducting validation on 2 pharmaceutical drugs that can be used to control COVID-19. The Research Council noted that it would inform the results of the process in the near future. Issuing a statement, the National Research Council stressed that it had not received a request to validate the herbal tonic developed by indigenous medical practitioner Dhammika Bandara in Kegol. US President-elect Joe Biden has received his first dose of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine, saying he was getting the jab to show Americans it is safe to take. Biden joins a growing number of political leaders getting the jab, including Vice President Mike Pence and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Singapore received its first shipment of COVID-19 vaccine yesterday on board a Singapore Airlines cargo flight from Belgium, where it was manufactured. Singaporean Prime Minister said that COVID-19 vaccines will be free for all Singaporeans and long-term residents who are currently living in Singapore. Bangladeshi government announced the free distribution of 30 million doses of Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine expected to be available for patients in January. The government has already allocated 7.35 billion taka to purchase the vaccine. Maldivian media reported that the Maldivian government plans to provide COVID-19 vaccines free of charge to citizens of the island country. The COVID-19 vaccines are expected to arrive in the Maldives in early 2021.
Attention was drawn to expedite the process of bringing down the COVID-19 vaccine to Sri Lanka during the COVID-19 discussion held today. During the meeting, advisor to the President Lalit Wiratunga was entrusted with the task of coordinating all measures to facilitate this move. After a detailed analysis, post discussion with local health authorities and the relevant stakeholders overseas. The groups that would be entitled for the vaccine will be chosen on a requirement and priority-based process. During the meeting, a discussion was also reached to collect data of high-risk COVID-19 areas, including estates, elders' homes and hostels, and data of locals residing in such areas. Meanwhile, the United Nations has assured Sri Lanka its support for procuring, distributing and administering the COVID-19 vaccine. According to a statement issued by the Prime Minister's office, this pledge was made during a meeting between Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and a UN delegation comprising of UN Resident Coordinator Hannah Singer, World Health Organization representative Dr. Razia Penze and UNICEF representative Tim Sutton. The UN delegation and Sri Lankan officials agreed that vaccination at such a mass scale will require a whole-of-government approach to ensure Sri Lanka's preparedness for the delivery and administration of the vaccine once it arrives. Tim Sutton stressed that while UNICEF is already assisting with procurement during the initial phase, it can also assist the government with vaccine procurement beyond the initial 20%. One of the key messages that emerged from the meeting from all officials is that people cannot become complacent even after receiving the vaccine.
මම වකුගඩු රෝගියෙක් මට 85000ක් ස්කෑන් එකක් කරන්න තමයි එයා රට ගියේ. දැන් මම එයාගේ 95000 තියාගෙන මම ස්කෑන් එක නොකර ඉන්නවා. මම මැරුණත් මට ඕන මගේ ගෑණිගේ මූණ බලලා බලන්න. මම මගේ ගෑණි ගැන විතරක් නෙමෙයි මාත්‍යෝ කතා කරන්නේ. තව අම්මලා සහෝදරයෝ ගොඩක් දෙනෙක් ඉන්නවා මාත්‍යෝ රට දුක් විඳිනවා.
Well, that was the manner in which Asoka Sudesh voiced his concerns during the Davasa program aired on Sirasa TV yesterday. His only request is to bring back his wife to the country. Asoka Sudesh is one among many individuals who are facing difficulties in repatriating their loved ones to Sri Lanka. We are now joined by Tharusha Kumar Singer from the newsroom. Tharusha, could you brief us more on this matter, please?
Arundhati, it was yesterday that Mr. Asoka got in touch with us on the Davasa program aired on our sister channel Sirasa TV, and also it was yesterday that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs revised the procedure for travellers arriving in Sri Lanka from abroad. Now, interestingly enough, according to this new revision, if a Sri Lankan national wishes to use a particular airline to come to Sri Lanka, first they should certify to that particular airline that they can afford to undergo quarantine procedure here in Sri Lanka at an expensive hotel at an exorbitant amount. That is a sad reality right there. If we can take a look at the situation back in the Middle East, many Sri Lankans have lost their jobs, their visas have expired, and many Sri Lankan migrant workers are suffering because they cannot come to Sri Lanka. Now, this is a very serious issue, and this is a special report that we have compiled on that regard.
මගේ නෝනා රට ගිහිල්ලා ලබන මාසේ 23 වෙනිදාට අවුරුද්දක් වෙනවා. දැන් මේ කොරෝනා හින්දා දැන් එයා අවුරුද්දකටම එයාට මාස 8ක් පඩි දීලා.
The 23rd of next month would mark a year since my wife travelled overseas for employment. She has not received her wages for 8 months due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I am suffering from kidney-related ailments. I have to undergo a scan. I am the 276th person on the list of patients to undergo the scan at the hospital. I have been on the list for 2 years. I need 80,000 rupees to undergo the scan. Therefore, my wife flew overseas to fund my scan. But the pandemic struck just less than a month since she left the country. The pandemic has worsened in the country. I don't receive my wages here either. Therefore, I visited foreign employment agencies to seek the repatriation of my wife. She's being beaten there. She told me that she wants to return to the country as she is afraid. I am afraid for her more than she is. I am a patient with a long-standing illness. We must both die together. I must die before her eyes since she flew overseas for my benefit. Therefore, if any harm befalls her, I cannot bear to let that happen. I will be at fault if my family falls into trouble. I was told that it would cost 450,000 rupees to bring her back to the country. They are also seeking 75,000 rupees daily for the quarantine process. If we had the money, she wouldn't need to fly overseas. Expatriate workers are sent overseas under an insurance. We pay 15,000 rupees as a monthly premium. When I inquired about that, I was told that 1 million rupees would be paid only in the case of her death. Then there is no point of the insurance scheme. I am not talking only on behalf of my family. There are other families that are experiencing a similar plight. All of them are helpless. My wife has sent me 95,000 rupees, but I'm not using it for my scan if it is coming at the cost of affecting my family. I don't need the scan. It would be enough if I can live with my family in the country. I can survive even by affording very basic meals.
මට මගේ පවුල ලංකාවට ආවම මට ඇති. මට ස්කෑන් එකක් අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. අපි දෙන්න ලැක්කට මැරලා ගියත් මට ඒක සතුට එයා මගේ ළඟ ඉන්නවා.
An emotional Ashoka Sudesh poured out his grievances to repatriate his wife to the country during the Davasa program aired on Sirasa TV yesterday. As Newsfirst went in search for him today, Sudesh was engaged in labour with the hope of collecting funds for the repatriation of his wife. Sri Lankan Airlines has published advertisements on repatriation packages to bring back Sri Lankans employed in the Middle Eastern countries. According to the office of Sri Lankan Airlines in Dubai, it would cost approximately 124,000 rupees to undergo quarantine at a hotel for 14 days. This too would be offered only on the condition of sharing the quarantine facility with another returnee or a group of repatriated workers. However, Sri Lankans employed in the Middle East who have been deprived of jobs and wages amidst the COVID-19 pandemic point out that they cannot afford such expensive packages. I need to return to Sri Lanka. My visa has expired. I'm experiencing difficulties at the location in which I'm staying at present. I am requesting to fly back to the country but don't have money to purchase a flight ticket or to afford the quarantine process. We are unable to return to the country. We cannot afford quarantine at hotels. We only receive minimal wages. The people here have been affected. Bombs are exploding in this country. We are living amidst all of that. We have children. We must fund their education and send them to school, reduce the cost of tickets and provide us with state-run quarantine facilities. The Foreign Relations Ministry has announced that Sri Lankans can return to the country by only undertaking the responsibility of undergoing paid quarantine at a designated hotel.
රජය කිසිම අවස්ථාවක සහනාධාර ක්‍රමයකටවත් මේ ජනතාව මේ විදේශගත ශ්‍රමිකයෝ
The government has never repatriated workers under a concessionary scheme. Our expatriate workers contribute to about $7 billion in remittances in the country, but based on the present conditions, workers can return to the country only if they can afford it. The cost of repatriation ranges between 400,000 and 500,000. No expatriate worker can afford 14,000 rupees daily throughout the 14-day quarantine period. On what basis have the hotels been chosen? This is a mafia to line the pockets of the government's allies. They have selected designated hotels to allow the returnees to undergo quarantine for 14,000 rupees daily.
තමන්ට කැමති හෝටල් වලට තමයි දාන්නේ.
What is the latest circular that has an impact on expatriate workers returning to the country?
දැන් චක්‍රලේඛයක් නිකුත් වෙලා තියෙනවා අලුත්ම චක්‍රලේඛනය.
Based on the latest circular, expatriate workers will be able to book their flight tickets only after they have paid the fee required to undergo quarantine at hotels. This process must take place at a low cost, given that this is a time when locals can fly out of the country at low rates. By increasing the prices, the government is allowing their henchmen to benefit out of these activities.
නමුත් මේක ගජමිතුරන්ට සලකන්න කරපු තවත් මාෆියාවක්.
Doesn't the Foreign Employment Bureau have sufficient funds to repatriate Sri Lankans?
හිටපු ශ්‍රමිකයන් වෙනුවෙන් ගෙවපු වන්දි මුදලක් තියෙනවා. ඒ වන්දි මුදල ඒ කාලේ
There was a compensation that had been paid to expatriate workers. In instances in which the compensation could not be paid, the money had been deposited in a special account. The Foreign Employment Bureau has about 8 billion rupees collected in the account. Therefore, they can repatriate these workers and fund their quarantine process with ease. But the government is not intervening into this. It was Sri Lanka Insurance that has signed an agreement. Therefore, they can hold talks with either Sri Lanka Insurance or the insurance companies to fund the repatriation of these workers. But they have not intervened into this problem. They brought back expatriates during the election, but today our workers are dying overseas. They are living under inhumane conditions.
හිඟා කන්න සිද්ධ වෙලා තියෙනවා.
Flights arriving from the United Kingdom have been temporarily suspended with effect from today.
A new strain of the COVID-19 virus has been identified in southeast England, which is considered 70% more contagious. The government reached a decision today to temporarily suspend all flights arriving from the UK. One flight has already left the UK and is due to arrive in the island. All passengers and staff members on board the aircraft will be directed to quarantine. Transit passengers will also be quarantined. Our government's prime responsibility is to protect its citizens.
Meanwhile, the Civil Aviation Authority has announced that airports in the country are set to reopen for commercial flights on the 26th of this month. The Foreign Ministry has said that the National Operations Centre for the Prevention of COVID-19 outbreak will arrange special repatriation flights by coordinating with overseas Sri Lankan missions for migrant workers, students, patients, short-term visa holders, government and military officials. They will be directed to state-run quarantine facilities upon arrival to the country. Other Sri Lankans or dual citizens will be able to return to the country on commercial or non-repatriation flights and undergo paid quarantine at designated hotels. Meanwhile, the government has approved a proposal to bring down a group of Russian tourists following the reopening of airports in the country. The group, comprising of more than 200 tourists, is expected to arrive at the Bandaranaike International Airport and the Matala International Airport on the 26th of this month. Journalists raised questions regarding this move during today's cabinet media briefing. Carrying out a PCR test prior to entering the country and after entering the country have been identified as two most important factors. We will only allow people who are part of a travel bubble to enter the country. However, that too will depend on their PCR test results. We will consider this matter from a very sensitive aspect.
ප්‍රතිඵල මතයි. ඒ නිසා ඊටාම සංවේදීව ඒ කාර්ය පිළිබඳව සලකා බලනවා. විදේශ සංචාරකයෝ මෙහෙම ගෙනන පසුබිමක අපේ දේශීය සංචාරකයන් මෙහෙම ගන්න ක්‍රියාමාර්ගය මොකක්ද? විදේශ සංචාරකයන් එම
Tourists arriving from overseas will bear all costs for the PCR tests. The government plans to carry out random COVID tests on local tourists at several areas. We have not enforced any rules as such or made it compulsory for local tourists to undergo a PCR test prior to travelling. However, we have urged everyone to follow health guidelines when travelling.
සෞඛ්‍ය උපදේශන තමයි අපි ලබා දීලා තියෙන්නේ.
ලබන 26 වෙනිදා සිට කොපමණ සංචාරක පිරිසක් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන විශේෂයෙන්ම රුසියාවෙන් වගේ ඒ වගේම මොන මොන ප්‍රදේශවල හෝටල්ද මේ සඳහා වෙන් කරලා තියෙන්නේ.
ඇත්තටම මේක දැනට අපි අර
The move to reopen the airports on the 26th will take place under a pilot project.
තෝරාගත් ව්‍යාපෘතියක් හැටියට තමයි ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන සංචාරක ව්‍යාපාරයට යම්කිසි ජීවයක් ලබා දෙන්නට.
The co-cabinet spokesperson failed to mention the names of the hotels that will provide accommodation facilities to the tourists that will arrive in the island. Generally, thousands of tourists flock to Nurelia during the month of December. But today, these areas have gone empty. In my view, only the large-scale businesses will profit from the reopening of airports. The small businesses will not have an opportunity to benefit from such measures. We have learned that our borders will be reopened for foreign traffic. However, these tourists will only seek accommodation at the high-end hotels. We urge the authorities to think about the small businesses and the common man as well, and to give us the opportunity to benefit from such a move.
Moving on to news from neighbouring India, the farmers' protest against the 3 contentious farm laws entered day 27 today as talks between the protesters and the central failed to produce any decisive result.
As the centre called for dialogue with the protesters' representatives, the farmers have given the sense that they will not accept anything other than complete rollback of the 3 laws. Yesterday, several farmers intensified their agitation towards the government as they went on an indefinite hunger strikes. The Bharatiya Kisan Union took to protesting against Prime Minister Narendra Modi outside the district administrative complex. The protesters also took the time to meet and have dialogue with farmers supporting the law in order to educate themselves regarding how the laws might be beneficial to them. The farmer-led protests erupted in response to 3 laws passed under Modi's government, with farmers concerned deregulation of agricultural markets will favour corporate interests such as billionaire Adani's agricultural businesses and make farmers vulnerable to exploitation. At least 41 farmers have died since the 15th of September when protests intensified against 3 central farm laws.
Moving on to more local news, the official term of the Presidential Commission of Inquiry appointed to probe the April 21st attacks has been extended until 31st of January next year. The Presidential Commission was set to conclude on the 20th of this month. The commission was established on the 20th of September 2019 by an extraordinary gazette to probe the unfortunate attacks that took place on the 21st of April 2019. Now, sluice gates of 3 reservoirs under the Irrigation Department were opened this afternoon. According to the Director of Water Management at the Department of Irrigation, Engineer D. Abhisriwardana, the sluice gates of the Rajangana, Kalugaloya and Murana reservoirs have been opened in this manner. Meanwhile, the Meteorology Department says that showers exceeding 100 millimeters can be expected in several areas in the eastern and Uva provinces and in Matale and Nuwara area districts. The Met Department further said that other areas will experience showers or thunder showers as well.
An 86-year-old individual has been killed after an earth embankment collapsed due to heavy showers in Galevala. The accident had taken place at around 6:45 this morning. Another woman who sustained injuries from the accident was admitted to the Dambula Base Hospital. 2 areas located on the Hinguragoda Mineria Road has been inundated due to heavy showers experienced in the Polonnaruwa district. This was the manner in which several areas and farmlands in the Hinguragoda town were inundated following heavy showers experienced in the area. The water level of the Mahavali River in Manampitiya had rapidly increased due to heavy showers in the area. Several areas in Gallalla and Manampitiya were reported to be inundated and transportation of vehicles have been hampered due to this. According to our correspondents, the Somavati road has been completely closed due to extreme weather conditions.
Moving on to sports news. Now, Pakistan was able to defeat the Black Caps by 4 wickets in their third and final 2020 cricket encounter today. However, New Zealand was able to win the series 2-1. And with that, we wrap up tonight's edition of Primetime News. Thank you very much for joining us. Good night.
කාදින දොරේ දශකයක අත්දැකීම්.
දෙවන ජුවන් පාවුලු පාප් වහන්සේගෙන් කෙනෙක් ඇහුවා උන්වහන්සේට හොඳටම අසනීප වෙලා ඉන්න කාලෙදී ඇයි ඔබ ඉල්ලාස් වෙන්නේ නැත්තේ කියලා. දුන්න උත්තරේ තමයි ජේසුස් ක්‍රිස්තුස් වහන්සේ කුරුසියෙන් බැහැලා ආවේ නැහැ කියලා.